Well, a very good evening and welcome to Cheshire. I'm back tonight at the Royal British Legion Club in Runcorn, and tonight I am joined by a group of what can be described as riotous, rambunctious reformers! Well, a very good evening to you. Runcorn is perched on the banks of the River Mersey. It's just downstream from Liverpool. It actually sits in the shadow of the iconic Silver Jubilee Bridge and the Mersey Gateway Bridge as well. Now, this town helped to power the Industrial Revolution. It was the birthplace of that phenomenal event, and it became a powerhouse through its chemical works, its factories, its canals, and quite frankly, the sheer hard grit and determination of its people. But history was not kind. In modern Britain, this once bustling port is now a place where that promise of progress feels like it's been packed up and sold off. However, Runcorn is proud, it is resilient. But like many towns in the northwest, it has seen the sharp end of decades of political neglect, from underfunded services to inadequate housing, poverty of schooling, also unreliable transport links, also rising crime, the vast majority of which goes unpunished. And all of this has left a legacy of huge consequences. Runcorn's story, though, sadly, is not unique. It's one that is echoed across Cheshire, from the once thriving market towns of Northwich and also Winsford, to the commuter belt of Warrington, the rural heartlands around Nantwich, to the historic city of Chester. Now, this is a county of contrast. There are villages and valleys with pockets of great affluence, and they sit next to areas which have quite simply been left behind. But wherever you go in Cheshire, you will hear the same frustrations, you will hear the same safety concerns. Knife crime is up. Antisocial behaviour goes unchecked. There are simply not enough police on the streets. And let me tell you, in some parts of Cheshire, nearly half of all recorded crime is violent crime. And all the while, victims are ignored whilst criminals continue to walk free. The question is, why is this being allowed to happen? And the answer to that is because the system is broken and Britain is lawless. Well, on tonight's show, we have a fantastic lineup of guests. We're going to begin with Cheshire's very own councillor, Emma Guy, who will be sharing her thoughts on the crucial role that local councillors play in our communities. Then we will hear from Reform UK's police and crime advisor. He's former Detective Chief Inspector Colin Sutton, and he will give us an in-depth look into crime and policing. And to round things off, we'll be joined by Runcorn's very own Member of Parliament, of course, the one, the only Sarah Pochin. Well done, well said. Now, just before we meet my first guest, let me just give you some facts on crime generally. These are quite extraordinary. When we look at total crime, it is now 50% higher than it was in the 1990s. And wait for this, it's 4 times higher than it was in the 1970s. Last year, there were 500,000 cases of shoplifting. Nearly 250,000 bikes were stolen, along with 90,000 phones. And when you look at knife crime, that's increased by 87% and has caused over 400 hospital admissions. And here is a fact that I couldn't believe when I read it. Astonishingly, over 250,000 young people carry knives in the mistaken belief they offer protection. And if that wasn't bad enough, a violent crime is committed in England every 17 seconds. Those are extraordinary statistics. Well, joining me now is Councillor Emma Guy. She's lived and worked in the area for almost 35 years. She was elected as a councillor in March 2025 for Northwich Town Council, and I'm delighted to say she joins me now. Please give her a very big warm welcome. Emma, it's really good to see you tonight. Thank you so much for being with us. Just tell us a little bit about your background. Why did you decide to put your head above the parapet and say, right, I'm going to be a councillor?
Yeah, my grandma always said to me that give something back to the community and it'll fill your heart with joy. And she was absolutely right. In the late 80s, I became a special constable in Cheshire Constabulary. And in the 2000s, I was a parish councillor. So community really has always been in my heart from the very beginning.
That's amazing.
I picked Reform because I mainly was an independent before. I couldn't really hang my hat on any of the policies of the other parties. And for me, when I read the policies of Reform, I just thought, yeah, these align with my views, my values, and also the policies are just common sense.
Good. I'm really pleased to hear you say that. And actually, being a councillor is really important. It's really hard work as well. Just in terms of the issues you face on a daily basis, what sort of things come across your plate?
Mainly the basic stuff. The stuff like maybe the bushes in the street that need chopping back. I had a gentleman who contacted me and said, I can't get my wheelchair, my wife can't push the wheelchair because the bush is stopping me going down the pathway. I reported it, it got chopped back, and he contacted me again saying, thank you so much. And it's the basic things, I think, in the community. Things that, you know, my constituents in the Greenbank ward just want to feel listened to, but also they want someone to deliver what they're actually asking for.
And I think that's really important, actually, in terms of Reform UK and where it's going. If it really wants to be the party of government, we, Reform UK, has to prove that actually we listen to people and that we deliver at the local level.
Absolutely. And, you know, you've got examples of there's not a bus that goes through the middle of my ward. We've been campaigning for that for a number of months, and in fact, previous councillors were, and we've actually got a pilot scheme now. You know, it's about actually just listening and understanding where your value is as a councillor.
And just in terms of the most urgent issues that you hear from your constituents, obviously there are things that are very practical, whether it's about, as you say, wheelchair access. What are the big things that are driving people to complain? Is it things like, I will bring up immigration, for example? How much of that comes across your desk? Also crime?
I think actually it goes down to the national level when we hear things actually happening from crime, you know, those statistics, you know. When I was a special constable, the first thing that I was trained to do was to stop and search safely. Yeah. And stop and search has declined over the last 10 years.
By 50%?
I mean, 50%. That is so shocking that, you know, that someone can walk down the street with a machete and think that the law...
But the idea that you've got 200,000, you know, whatever it is, people, kids having knives, for example, because they believe that actually that will protect them. It is not going to protect them. In fact, it's actually going to harm them.
No, and we hear it not just in Cheshire, in this area, we hear it across the UK as well. You know, to walk at night time in the middle of London as a woman actually worries me, it scares me. You know, but when we see the violent crimes actually rising in Cheshire, you know, the percentages are just absolutely unbelievable.
So I've been in our Reform UK Council in Lancashire recently. They're doing a really good job actually trying to turn that around. Do you think there's a disconnect between what councils have been doing until this point, until your election obviously, and what the people of this area actually want? And they're saying, as you say, we're not being listened to. Is there a disconnect, do you think, between the two?
Yeah, people want to be listened to, people want action, and that's what we're seeing across some of the Reform councils across the country, that people are actually picking up and saying, right, how do we deal with this? You know, how do we become more efficient? How do we reduce the wastage? You know, and that's what we need in Cheshire.
And so I mean, I think it's extraordinary that you've devoted your life to public service, and that's a great testament to you. So congratulations for doing that. But just in terms, it must be incredibly satisfying when you solve what appear to be quite small problems, but actually for that gentleman who couldn't actually get the wheelchair access, for example, just doing something very small like that actually makes a massive difference to people's lives.
Oh, unbelievable. I had a lady when I was campaigning mentioned that the no entry sign, it was a one-way street. And I said, look, if I'm elected, I will help you try and get highways out there to put signage up, etc. And I contacted Highways. Highways said, well, we can't give you road sign, but we will maybe look at marking the road. And yeah. So I went round to her house and said, look, this is what I've done. And she went, wow, I didn't expect to see you back on my doorstep. And I said, not only what I've done with highways, I've also contacted SatNav. So SatNav is being updated. I've also updated the OS data. And she went, why were you not here 10 years ago? So it's little, it sounds little, but it's not.
No,
it's actually not. Listening to their concerns and actually trying to do something. Even if you can't get the right answer for them, if you get some way towards that, then that's a progress.
Absolutely. And of course, we've got 865 councillors now in this country. For people who are watching this, who are undecided about how to vote, maybe they've been tribally a Labour voter or a Conservative voter, for example, what would you say to them about the journey that Reform UK is on, the mission Reform UK is on, and why they should consider voting for the party?
I think it goes back to the contract that we had. In 2016, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I stepped away from local politics at that point. And about 4 years ago, I was watching the news one night and I said to my husband, I can't sit back and let this happen. I've got to go back into local politics. I've got to make a difference. And that for me is what's in my heart. I just want to make a difference for my community and my area. What I would urge everyone to do is do exactly what I did. Read all of the policies on every single that what we have in our contract, and I'd ask you just to say, they're just common sense. And that to me is bringing people back together again. It's important that we've got all this division that actually we want to bring people back together again.
Well, I think you're doing an extraordinary job, and many congratulations. And I'm sure the people of this community are absolutely thrilled that you're in office. Thank you very much, Councillor Emma Guy. Thank you. Well, my next guest is former Detective Chief Inspector. He is widely regarded as one of Britain's most effective and respected senior detectives. Now, over his 30-year career, he has led some of the UK's most high-profile and complex murder investigations. He was actually head of the Metropolitan Police Murder Squad for the last 9 years of his career, leading more than 30 successful murder investigations, famously pursuing serial killer Levi Belfield, as well as serial rapist Delroy Grant, also known as the Night Stalker. He's an extraordinary man, and here is his story.
Crime is going unchecked all over the place, all over the country. I'm Colin Sutton. I was a police officer for 30 years. I was fortunate enough to lead a marvellous team when we were investigating some of the nastiest and most publicised murders, I suppose, of the first part of this century. We convicted the serial killer Levi Belfield, the serial rapist and night stalker Delroy Grant. I get known as a detective. I'd rather be known as a leader. My number one thing really was to look after the team. Leaders now tend to think an awful lot about themselves and their own careers rather than their team and the community. And I think we need to go back to that if we're going to have policing succeed and policing to return to something that is accepted and welcomed by the community. Two-tier policing, two-tier criminal justice system is one that's been bandied about a lot. I don't think it's an unfair thing to say. I think the perceptions are real. You've only got to look through the news, through social media, at the disparity between sentences for different crimes or for people from different communities or from different ideologies. And I start asking myself and say, well, how can it be? How do we end up in this situation where these disparities are there, but they're real? First reason for that is just simply numbers. Officers in London, particularly, are going from blue light call to blue light call to blue light call, and they haven't got time to speak to people. They haven't got time to find out about their community. There's too much work to do, that things are not happening in the criminal justice system quickly enough, decisively enough. 14 years of the Tories caused it. It happened on their watch. We made a difference when I was in the police service. There's no doubt about that. And I thought, well, maybe I've got an opportunity now to make a difference with another team. And so that team, I think, is Reform. I believe in it. The greatest asset Reform has in some ways is our leader, because he is a communicator. We need to be able to replicate that locally so people will follow us. It's about teamwork and it's about one voice taking other people with us. I think the best chance of making sure we turn this round and we make this change is if we have a Reform UK government. Britain is lawless. Britain needs reform.
And the man himself is with me now. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Sutton. Now, I haven't seen you since Monday. We spoke on Monday back at base in London where we were talking about crime generally. Just clearly, you've had the most extraordinary, amazing career, actually, and you've spent all this time policing on the front line. When you look at what is going on now in Britain, what or how would you describe the state of policing in Britain as we stand today?
Just broken. Just really, you know, there are two things. One is that the resourcing has been cut so much and was cut so much from 2010 that you've now got far, far fewer officers, and important functions like schools liaison, neighbourhood officers have been cut. And that's fed into the disengagement from the community that I think the police now have. And I got texted this today from somebody. I'll just read it out to you. I visited Westminster Basic Command Unit, so the right centre of London. The sergeant there said they've got over 3,500 crimes awaiting allocation. The ship has sunk. It's madness.
I mean, that's just devastating.
That's coming from inside the police service, yeah? So they don't make the best use of the resources they have left, but there is no doubt that there are too few resources there to start with.
But also there's something deeply worrying going on when you look at crime generally. I'm just going to look at these statistics here in the Northwest. There's a knife crime every 80 minutes, a violent crime every 1.8 minutes, and a crime in this area every 44 seconds. Something terrible is going on in this country.
That's scary, isn't it?
It is.
It's really scary, and it's you know, there's an awful lot of a rural area around here, isn't it? I know the area. My wife's from Cheshire, and I know the area reasonably well around here. And rural crime's a big issue for. I live in a rural community elsewhere in the country.
As do I, yeah. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. So rural crime actually cost the UK £44 million a year, and we are seeing more and more of this. As you know, obviously, farmers have huge amounts of equipment which they need to make sure that they actually produce the food that we eat, and that's being nicked. And they're just people just going in and nicking farmer equipment.
Everybody's going for the farmers at the moment.
They are. Everyone, including the Labour government.
You know, but yeah, the GPS is getting stolen from the tractors just on a daily basis. Even, you know, I live in rural Norfolk. So there just aren't the officers to deal with that. But it's more fundamental than that. It's more fundamental in that the officers that are there. I'm good-hearted enough and good-spirited enough to think that the young men and women who join our police service and want to serve their communities want to do a decent job, by and large.
I agree.
And somebody is tying their hands behind their back. And that's a question of leadership.
So I've got many friends in the police service, and they're very experienced, and they have said to me repeatedly, I can't do this anymore. I'm being asked to do more and more paperwork. I'm not allowed out on the street. In fact, some of them have turned down promotion because they know that promotion means more paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, there's too much paper. What's more worrying to me are the young men and women who are joining and leaving after 3 or 4 years because they're finding that policing is not what they expected it to be. They're not doing the job for their community that, thank heavens, they decided they wanted to do. Because if people didn't want to do that job, we'd all be stuck, wouldn't we?
We would.
Why are we stopping them from doing what they want to do?
So just in terms of crime generally, is it the fear? Is it because people think that they won't get caught that we're seeing these figures? I mean, when you look back at shoplifting, 500,000, personal theft, 152,000, 27,000 muggings. When you look at kids as well, and we spoke about this on Monday, all these kids, 200,000 carrying knives, for example, 4,000 hospital admissions, 250,000 kids carrying knives. I mean, this is just off the scale.
Yeah. And we've seen, I think you referred earlier, to a 50% reduction in stop and search. Some of that is due to political pressures on them.
Yeah.
Because of this stupid argument that certain communities are alienated by it. There is no substitute. You cannot enforce the laws against carrying knives in public places unless you have stop and search. It's the only way of doing it.
So you're saying that actually it's political correctness?
There's political correctness, but what that's done now is we've got to the stage where, if I could find it on my phone, but I can't, but I've got another message I had once from a young police officer who said, nobody knows how to do stop and search anymore because we've not been doing it. And you've got a cohort of officers now who were trained during COVID who did their stop and search training over Zoom.
How can you do that?
That's true. Well, you tell me. But not only were they vetted over Zoom and didn't see a real person, but they were trained to do stop and search over Zoom.
Let's just talk about some other facts, which I think people here will find absolutely shocking. 46,000 kids that we know of are in criminal gangs. So that's a big statistic. We also touched on this on Monday, which is actually the prevalence of drugs generally. When you look at the use of drugs, the county lines, people selling drugs, when you look at that, 50% of thefts and 70% of shoplifting is related to drug use.
Yeah, drugs have always been a huge driver towards acquisitive crime. I can remember having a slightly inebriated conversation with my detective inspector when I worked in West Yorkshire many years ago, saying we'd be better spending our money on heroin and giving it away at the front counter. That would stop more crime than spending £7 million on crime prevention like we were doing, which is a very cynical view, but you understand the pressures. I'll say again what I said to you on Monday, though, because I think it's a really important point here. We've spent the last 50 years trying to, and you've heard this phrase before, smash the gangs in terms of drugs.
Now, where have I heard that?
We haven't succeeded with that, have we? So
No.
what makes us think we're going to succeed with the small boats? But that's another argument.
I mean, certainly this needs to be re-looked at, actually. I think generally, actually, the way that we're tackling drugs or not tackling drugs in this country, and also just generally what we do. So if you were the boss, what would you do to restore public trust in the police, to actually allow people to feel safe? We spoke about this, that people feel that they can't actually walk down the street wearing a watch, an expensive watch.
That's right. And it's...
So what do you do?
I think the first thing is to reopen the police stations. I saw today...
That's very popular.
Yeah. Because... You've actually got big communities that have to go miles to find a police station. I always say to people, if they say, you don't see a police officer around here, I'll say, pop down your local A&E, you'll see loads there, because they're sitting with mental health cases and that sort of thing. But, you know, I'm sorry, I know I'm in Cheshire, I'm talking about London because it's where I worked, but we had 136 front counter police stations in London when I left the police 13 years ago. That is now going to go down to 20 in the near future. I made a little video in my hometown of Enfield in North London. We had 5 front counters. There's a population of 350,000 people. There is one there now, and that's closing. And they're going to have to go from there to Wood Green in the next borough, which from some parts of that borough is 10 miles away, just to go and see a police officer.
So if Reform UK gets into government, would that be a Reform UK policy you'd push, is to reopen police stations, community policing? I said this to you on Monday, which is, as a young person, we may or may not have been a bit naughty when we were younger.
I think we all were.
But I got a clip literally round the ear from the local bobby, and I didn't do it again.
Yeah, we can't do that. I can't be advocating clipping people round the ear.
I think times have changed.
Because times have changed. But I think the idea of re-engaging with communities is key to this, and we start re-engaging by having somewhere. If you've got the high street and you're walking there and the shop's boarded up in between the vape shops and the barbers, if you've actually got a blue light there shining out and you know there's someone inside there that can help you, how does that make you feel that much more safer in what you're doing walking up and down there?
Absolutely. Can we just talk about one other big issue, which is two-tier policing? Is it alive and well in Britain?
I believe it is now. Regretfully and sadly, I believe it is. And there are... I spent a long time when it started with the demonstrations, with the Palestinian demonstrations and things like that, trying to explain the different ways of doing public order policing, because depending on whether people are fighting and throwing things or just chanting, there are different ways of doing it. But I think it's more than a two-tier policing system. We see a two-tier criminal going on, isn't there? There is two-tier in terms of the way in which different or the same offences are used for people depending on where they come from or what they're talking about.
I mean, it seems extraordinary to me, and we have spoken about this as well, that if you tweet something because you're angry, let's take that example, that you then get banged up, and that sentence is much harsher than someone who is covering their face, protesting, doing awful things on British streets. That's wrong.
Or actually committing sexual assaults or rapes.
Indeed.
You know, we've seen that. And, I made this point in the first press conference I gave when I took up the role, and it was twisted, as things often are on social media. But I'll say it again. When I was a kid, when I was a young police officer, I'd go home to mum and dad and say, brilliant, we locked up a burglar last night. I cannot believe that today's police officers go home and say, brilliant, I found a really nasty tweet.
I know.
You know? But that is what their bosses are getting them to do. And what, so that's we change the culture and we change the leadership.
So now you've got to the nub of this. So where does the fault lie? Is it with the bosses of the police, or is it with the politicians that govern the bosses of the police?
I think, sadly, there's a very blurred line between those two bodies now. And that's really the problem. You know, the Home Office has always given guidance in terms of targets and things like that, but it's mixed in with the fact that leaders these days, perhaps all over, but I only really know about the police service, they care more about their own career than they do about their team and the community they're meant to be serving. That's what we need to change.
We do, indeed. So could I just ask you, finally, you've had the most illustrious career, an amazing career. What on earth possessed you to join Reform UK, to actually stand up and to say, look, I'm going to go into politics, I'm going to spearhead the political fight, I'm going to turn around this country, we're going to change the police force. When Reform UK is in government, I'm going to make sure the police force are out in force, they're respected, the public has them, there's trust restored in the police?
Well, I spent a couple of years and couldn't get my handicap below 11, so... no, look, I've never been somebody to sit on the sidelines and watch and moan. And I just thought there's a job to be done, I'll stick my hand up and do it. Simple as that, really.
I'm sure I speak for everyone here when I say I'm absolutely delighted that you've joined our team at Reform. So thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Sutton. Thank you very much. Well, I was last in Runcorn just before the by-election, where I met and campaigned with a woman who was determined to fight for the people of this area. Now, I'm delighted to say that she fought, she won, and she's now a Member of Parliament. I am, of course, talking about Sarah Pochin, MP. From magistrate to MP, Sarah is passionate about tackling crime and tackling criminals. Let's see more of Sarah in action.
The rise in antisocial behaviour and sexual violence against women and girls in our communities is alarming. I am constantly accused of scaremongering on this issue by the woke Labour blob. But the British people will not be lied to anymore. We know that we are heading towards a crisis point in our society. And the denial of this by the establishment is nothing short of treacherous. Recent unrest in Northern Ireland and Epping should serve as a stark warning to this government that the British people will not put up with this betrayal for the next 4 years.
Well, I'm delighted to say that Sarah Pochin MP joins me now. So, clearly a very popular choice, Sarah. I mean, you and I spend a lot of time together now, given that you're now a Member of Parliament and I'm Chairman.
On a work level.
On a work... Actually, not strictly true.
And in the pub.
And in the pub. You know, so let me just ask you, because you've gone from magistrate to MP, what's that been like to be a Member of Parliament?
I know. First of all, a huge privilege and an honour. And I can tell you absolutely honestly that I pinch myself every day I walk into Parliament, because I am doing, at my time in life, the job of my absolute dreams. I am living my best life. It's what I've wanted to do for so long. And I am so thankful to the people of Runcorn, Frodsham and Helsby that voted me in. But it's tough. You need to be resilient, and particularly being one of only 4 Reform MPs, and we are, without a doubt, the party of real opposition, but of course there's only 4 of us, so you have to be really tough, really resilient. My diet is jelly babies and gin and tonics.
Very good diet.
Very good diet.
Yeah, very good.
But, you know, you have to be tough, but with it comes with a huge sense of responsibility. And one of the rather sobering things about having now become the Member of Parliament for this constituency is just how much people are relying on me to deliver for them. And that is, like I say, a huge sense of responsibility. I try not to get overwhelmed with it. I can only do my very best.
Well, look,
and reassure them that I will.
Well, let me just tell everyone here that actually you are the most hard-working person I know, that you get up so early, you're across your brief the whole time. You ring me incessantly, by the way, that's a whole other thing.
True.
It is very true. When you were fighting the by-election, when you were knocking on doors and doing the stalls and all the stuff that we have to do as politicians, what were the issues that came up on the doorstep here?
So the by-election, very, very clear issues. The first one was a sense of betrayal by the core Labour vote, and this area had been Labour for pretty much ever. A sense of betrayal over things like the winter fuel allowance. That was a massive mistake by the Labour government. Also, the uncertainty over the disability benefits and what was going to happen to the disability benefits. Again, that caused so much concern. I had people coming into the campaign office in tears, you know, families, really not sure what was going to happen to the money in their pockets. And obviously older people very concerned about the winter fuel allowance. So that was one of the cost of living was one of the first things. We had the campaign office in Runcorn, as you know.
I do.
And the people of Runcorn came in, so many people. At one point we had 50 visitors a day, which was incredible. And they all just wanted to tell me how neglected they felt, how they felt that investment in Runcorn hadn't happened. It had all gone over the bridge into Widnes over the years. And they just wanted someone to be a strong voice for them. And then the third thing, if I may, is the growing concern about the migrant asylum-seeking population in Runcorn in particular. And I know I've been criticised for raising that, but I can promise you the constituents that have come in to talk to me about that, you know, it's during the campaign, and it hasn't stopped since. This is an issue, and the local authority and others are in denial over it. And only Reform will raise these issues. I
mean, and you've done a brilliant job at that. I mean, the question you asked in the House about the burqa, I thought was extremely brave of you, actually. I think people would agree. And the issue you bring up about hotels and migrants being plonked into communities, very tight-knit communities, they don't integrate, they're alien people in this country. That is a problem across the country, and people want this problem solved. We've seen 25,000 people coming here illegally already this year. It is unacceptable, isn't it? It's
unacceptable, but also it's an insidious invasion on our culture. And those are strong words, but somebody has to say those words, because that is what is happening out there.
Let's also talk about crime. I know that crime came up on the doorstep as well. I mean, when you look at these figures, I mean, they are extraordinary. A knife crime every 80 minutes, a theft every 2.9 minutes, a violent crime every 1.8 minutes. By the way, this is in the northwest. It's higher than the national average. What do you think's going on?
Well, we know for a fact, don't we, that antisocial behaviour, that's 13% of crime in the Runcorn area, the Halton area. These are Halton figures. 13% is antisocial behaviour, and we know that the police have not got probably enough resource, they would say, to go and deal with all of the issues. So people are having to live in the communities with antisocial behaviour. That is getting worse with the ever-increasing migrant population. We know that. It's a fact.
It is.
And the other big thing, though, is that 44% of crime in the Halton Borough Council area is violent and sexual assaults. And again, nobody likes talking about that. There's been 4 rapes in the Runcorn area in recent times by migrants. Now, the fact is that we know that culture also has little respect for women and young girls. So we need to be brave. I'm being brave by raising these issues. People want to deny it. They call me a racist. That's not the case. And I met the chief constable of Cheshire Police only earlier this week, I think it was. It might have been the end of last week. I'm that busy, I don't know what day it is. But very, very recently, I met the chief constable. And interestingly, he told me about an initiative that they started just in 2024, so only a year old. And they've actually developed a foreign national offenders unit in response to the need to have a foreign national offenders unit in the Cheshire area. Now, how interesting is that? So as a direct result, now they won't want, that's public knowledge. I'm not telling you something that you couldn't find out. But the fact is that sort of thing is not publicised, but, they've admitted that they've had to look at this problem.
So Colin mentioned about stop and search. What would a Reform UK government do? What are the quick wins here to restore confidence in the police, do you think, and actually to get sort of a grip on lawless Britain?
Look, I'm a massive supporter of stop and search. It's effective. Again, people will say that, oh, well, it's targeting young black males. Well, the fact is, it often is in response to the fact that young black males are often carrying more knives. It's a fact. Yeah. We can't. I'm not saying that white males don't, but the fact is, you can criticise it. The woke liberati will criticise that sort of policy. It's effective and it needs to be brought back. So I think, absolutely. But for me, it's about zero tolerance policing. We know that police don't come out. I know as a magistrate of 20 years, when I started in the courts, I would deal with shoplifting offences by individuals. Now, in latterly, I don't see those offences anymore. Well, they haven't stopped happening.
Well, we've decriminalised it pretty much, haven't we? Up to £200.
Exactly. So you can go into a shop, let's just do it. Let's just gather up to £200.
That's not official policy. Don't
that's not. No, that is not reform policy.
No.
But I'm exaggerating to make the point. But we need to bring back zero tolerance policing, whether it's knife, whether it's shoplifting. No crime is too small to go out and have a response to.
Let's talk about prisons. We have capacity for 87,000 people in prison in this country. We currently have 88,000 in the prisons, which have a capacity of 87,000. Yes, yeah. Shabana Mahmood, her answer is to let people out early. That seems to me an absolutely ridiculous thing to do, because if you've done the crime, you should serve the time. What would we do to deal with this huge problem?
Massive problem. The first thing I would say, I'm a huge champion for women's safety and letting out early release of criminals that, because of the bracket they fall into, between 1 and 4 years, are often domestic violence offenders. We know that those women have been so brave bringing that case to court, and now they're being utterly betrayed by the government, by the perpetrators of the domestic violence being let out early, because we know they go out and they commit the same crime. So that is a massive issue for me. But in terms of what we do about prison spaces, and by the way, as a magistrate, I would never be influenced by the fact that the prisons are full, so don't send them to prison.
Quite right.
Can you imagine my court operating that way? That shouldn't be a factor in sentencing. But what we do is, the first thing we do is we empty the prisons of 10,400 foreign national offenders. They go back to where they belong.
it is utterly staggering that there are 10,000 foreign nationals in our prisons.
That we're paying for.
That we are paying for.
£50,000 a year each.
It is completely, absolutely outrageous. Now, just in terms of ramping up that prison capacity, because I think one of the things, as you know, is that people aren't being sentenced appropriately because they're worried about the backlog, there aren't the prison places. So Reform UK has talked about things like Nightingale prisons, for example.
Yes.
Do you just want to say something about that?
Well, look, why not look at things? We need to start thinking outside the box. It's not acceptable to say that we're going to build, 5 prisons, it's going to cost, I don't know what, £10 million, and then, as we know, with all these projects, the costs escalate because, nobody seems to run efficiently a building project anymore in this country because there's so much red tape. Let's just go for some quick wins. We can set up prisons on whether it's former army bases, whatever it might be. We use the term Nightingale because, obviously, the COVID hospitals. There's no reason why a less secure unit, you put a fence around an army base. Why would we bother doing up the barracks? Do they deserve, 5-star accommodation and Sky TV? No, they don't. So stick them in a drafty, army barrack because that's what they deserve. They're criminals, for goodness sake. But we can make those the open prisons, which are less secure. So what you do is you can effectively move the prisoners down the line, if you see what I mean, and absolutely use that type of facility if we need to.
And Vanessa Frake, who we talked to on Monday, has been very clear about this, even looking at Supermax prisons, for example, just reiterating the point that we need to be very tough on crime because people will stop offending the minute they know that actually the justice is there and it will be served.
They will, but they also need to know that prison is not a soft option. And I have no time whatsoever for this nonsense about giving criminals kettles in their room that they can then throw boiling water over a prison officer.
Yeah.
What on earth are we doing? Sky TV and console video games and God knows what else they've got in there. This is meant to be prison. Prison is meant to be a punishment. Our whole soft approach is not acceptable.
Can I just bring it back to a personal level, because I've got to know you really well.
Will you stop saying that?
Sorry.
It does sound... You phone me all the time. I'm with you all the time,
well,
and now you know me on a personal level.
We'll probably have a drink later. When you read your epitaph, what kind of MP do you want to be known for? What would give you great joy? You clearly are very passionate. You want to do the best for your constituents, which is admirable, and it's absolutely the right reason to be in as a Member of Parliament in the House of Commons. What would you like to be known for?
That I was in it for the right reasons. I don't need to be doing this job. I could be sat at home and whatever. My husband would be delighted, actually, if I was sat at home. But I don't. I want to be known that I was in it for the right reasons, and that is that I've got a strong voice, and I want to use that voice to be brave for the people that haven't got the opportunity or are not brave enough to stand up for these issues. But not only that, I was brought up in such a patriotic, country-loving household that I feel strongly about Britain and making Britain great again. And actually, I think we are still great, but we just need to do something very quickly and very drastically about what's happening to this country. I'm brave. I will stand up and I will speak about these issues. So, I'm exactly the sort of person... I can't sit at home and complain. I've got to get out there and do something about it.
And finally, if I may, for people who are watching this who maybe were tribally Labour or tribally Conservative, who are undecided, but they kind of like what they're hearing from Reform UK, the party is going on an incredible journey. I mean, we are growing at such a pace, such a speed, actually. When you look at the number of councillors, for example, obviously we have the 4 MPs, but the structure in London, in Wales, in Scotland, for example, all of the 400 branches we have as well. What message would you give to those people about how they use their vote the next time they are asked to vote?
It's simple to me. If you care about your family, if you care about your community and if you care about your country, then Reform is the only party that will represent you and the only party that deserves to be in government.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, just put your hands together again. Sarah Pochin, Member of Parliament. Now, I've got some questions. I know you all submitted questions earlier on. We've got some of those questions. Now, John, where's John? I'm sure there are probably a lot of Johns here, but John, over here. Thank you, John. John asks, what is Reform UK's official stance on the migrant boats coming over to this country? We've heard stop the boats, smash the gangs. None of that is working. Reform UK stance.
Absolutely. Very straightforward. I've never changed the view on this, and this is the party view. Anybody that sets foot on a beach in this country does not enter the country. They immediately get taken to a deportation centre. I don't care if that deportation centre is a great big container ship in the middle of the Channel, or whether it's Rwanda or an offshore country somewhere. It doesn't matter. The point is they never set foot in this country, and if they ever apply to come back again, they don't get entry because they've tried to enter illegally. Full stop.
And of course, underpinning all of that is we have to leave the European Court of Human Rights.
No question. And on day one... On day one, when we're in government in 2029, if not before, because do we actually believe we can carry on like this? That will be one of the first things we start to do. It's an absolute bane of our lives. It doesn't represent what it was ever meant to represent. And in fact, other countries in Europe now who are finally admitting that they've got a problem, like Germany, are equally concerned now about the European Convention of Human Rights. It is not fit for purpose with the invasion of Europe that we are now experiencing.
Absolutely. Do you think it's possible to actually have an effect? I do not understand why we don't declare a national emergency under UN Convention of the Seas 1951. We turn the boats back, you put the Royal Navy in the Channel and you say, right, back you go.
Absolutely. That's what I've been calling for. Yeah.
Now, the next question is from Steve. Where is Steve? Thank you, Steve, for this question. With 4 years to go, I hope not, until,
yeah, we all hope
until the election, how will you keep the momentum going?
Oh, my goodness. You are all keeping the momentum going. I mean, the country is so behind us. And what I find incredible is the interest of all generations now. So I was out in the constituency today, and two ladies who actually weren't together, they approached me separately. They were in their 80s. They were both living next door to HMOs. So that's what their problem was.
These are houses of multiple occupancy.
Houses of multiple occupancy filled with asylum seekers.
Yeah.
But I was also at the station coming to pick you up.
An hour early, but yeah.
And whilst I literally was walking into Runcorn train station, a young guy who looked probably about 18 went, "Oh, Sarah, please can I have a selfie?" Everyone is engaged, and it is absolutely fantastic. And in all my time and interest, my whole life of interest in politics, I've never known a feeling, a momentum like this. We will keep it going because the people will keep it going.
And I think I'll just add to that, 60% of our voters are under the age of 50.
That's
just
incredible.
Shows you...
I mean, with the Tories, all of their voters are over the age of 80, pretty much.
They are. Jacqueline, where's Jacqueline?
Oh.
Where's Jacqueline? Oh, Jacqueline's over there. Hello, good evening to you, Jacqueline. Jacqueline says, how much longer do you think Labour can go on?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I tell you what, I can't believe for a minute that Keir Starmer will finish a full term.
No.
Everywhere he goes, he's U-turning. They look utterly incompetent. And, of course, he's got trouble in his own ranks as well. I mean, the backbenchers are rebelling. So I certainly think the first thing we will see is a split in Labour. And, of course, with Jeremy Corbyn's new initiative, that's going to split them even more.
Well, they keep calling it fruit and nut.
Corbyn
and Sultana. Yeah. I mean, that's going to be an issue, actually. Andrew, where are you? Andrew's asked that question, actually.
Okay.
What do you think the effect is if they... What's it called? Your Party or something?
They keep changing the name.
Yeah.
Have they chosen the name yet?
Your Party. Yeah, Your Party.
Right. Okay.
So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because actually, that's going to be a massive problem for Keir Starmer.
Massive problem for Keir Starmer, yeah, absolutely. It's going to split their vote. They have a lot of people on their MPs on their back benches who I think will look at that new party, whatever they decide to call themselves, and potentially move across. There's also a lot that would stand potentially in the next general election as independents, which potentially could join that party. So, yeah, it's utterly going to split Labour. They must be really concerned. Not only, I mean, we are clearly the biggest threat to them, but they now got Jeremy Corbyn as a threat as well.
So just going back to Jacqueline's question, though, how much longer do you think Labour can carry on? Do you think the election is in 4 years, or do you think... I mean, is there likely to be a vote of no confidence? He has a large majority currently.
I think the sad reality is it's probably unlikely that we can get a general election before the next 4 years. Unless, I mean, in terms of the, what do you call it, the process of the legal process,
yes.
You know, the fact is, I think it was Cameron, wasn't it, that brought in this 5-year fixed-term parliament?
Yes, and I believe that was then repealed. So the point is that actually Corbyn might decide that he would call an election early because it would be his best chance to stay in power. Also, I suppose...
You mean not Corbyn, you mean...
sorry, Starmer, yes, I get confused between the two.
Have I missed something?
No.
Is it Corbyn now? Yeah.
Well done, good, I'm glad you picked me up. But there is a train of thought to say that actually...
He might call it early.
He might call it early.
He has to call it.
Yes.
The problem is there's nothing we can do. No matter how much in despair we are, no matter how much the country is demonstrating its concerns, the people can't call that election. He has to call that election.
So I'm just going to finish on this one, if I may. Sorry, I can't get through all of these. Alan, where's Alan? Who's asked this? Alan over there at the back. Thank you for this. What do you think of Labour's... Oh, here we go. Great question. Oh. Labour's one in, one out policy.
Oh, my God, Alan. Well, what do you call it? 1 in 800? No, 800 in, 1 out. Yeah. And do you know what? I used the phrase yesterday on some interview I was doing. This is all about Starmer's love-in with Macron, isn't it? There's nothing else going on here whatsoever. It's an 11-month deal, that's all. And it will do nothing but bring masses more into this country, because for everyone that they say is coming in, they can all bring their families, of course, and they all have extended families to bring in. So this policy is an absolute disaster for this country, and it's smoke and mirrors, it's white noise, it's not addressing the problem.
And when you look at the small print, actually, they can decide who they accept back. They can actually say, we don't want anyone back.
You know what the French are going to do? They don't want any back at all,
Of course they don't.
Do they think we're idiots? Do they really?
Well, I think they think Starmer's an idiot, don't they?
Okay. So waste of time.
Waste of time, and we need to be far stronger on that. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah Poachin, MP. So, there you have it. You've heard from Councillor Emma Guy, you've heard from former Chief Detective Superintendent Colin Sutton, you've also heard, of course, from Sarah Poachin, MP. Now, the message on the ground here in Runcorn is absolutely overwhelming. Britain is lawless. And this is what we need to do. We need to strengthen our criminal legislation. We need to empower the police. We need more bobbies on the beat, and we need to effect zero tolerance of crime. And I'm telling you, ladies and gentlemen, the only way to enact all of that is to vote for Reform UK. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Until next time, from all of us here in sunny Runcorn, a very good evening.